Every site, plot, space has a story to tell. Something happened there that has contributed in some way to urban life. A blacksmith's forge to shoe the horses, the mill to feed the people, the brewery to quench the thirst, the schoolhouse to educate, the theatre to entertain, the castles, walls and towers to protect, the markets to trade, the churches to preach, and the jails to punish, and so on. The Irish Historic Towns Atlas has documented over 50,000 of these urban sites in Ireland, all within the bindings of the Irish Historic Towns Atlas fascicles. My name is Jennifer Moore, and I am an editorial and research assistant with the Irish Historic Towns Atlas with Sarah Gearty, Frank Cullen and Angela Byrne on the Suburb series. We work with an honorary editorial board of Howard Clark, Raymond Gillespie, Michael Potterton, Ruth McManus, Jonathan Wright, with Angrid Sims, who was here earlier on as our consultant editor, and Rachel Murphy as our digital chair. You may have been at Sarah Gearty's presentation a little earlier today, where she gave the cartographer's perspective of the IHTA. But for this presentation, I'm going to highlight the text, or the topographical information gazetteer, or the TI as we call it in the office, which is compiled for each of the Irish atlases. I hope to underline how incredibly rich and versatile the IHTA is as a source of Irish urban history. I'll illustrate the process of creating the atlases and demonstrate some of the micro-histories and some of the macro-histories that can be generated from this topographical information. To date, 30 atlases of 27 towns have been published since the project's inception in 1981, when the Royal Irish Academy agreed to host the IHTA. The Irish Atlas became part of a wider European movement to record the cartographic and urban histories of towns, many of which were destroyed during the bombings of World War II. The Irish project was born in the wake of the Wood Quay protests in Ireland during the 1970s, when there was an enhanced recognition to preserve and discover urban history as a way of understanding our heritage and culture. Initially, 40 towns were chosen to become part of this all-island project, 10 from each province, with varying origins ranging from the so-called monastic, Viking, Anglo-Norman, etc., up to the 19th century towns. Authors with expertise in the selected towns were and still are approached to take on a town and are supported in the office and occasionally by researchers. We work with Ordnance Survey Ireland and Land and Property Services Northern Ireland to provide mapping services that are reproduced in the publications, along with various repositories in Ireland and abroad that contain sources pertaining to the various towns and cities in Ireland. Sources for each atlas can vary in terms of their detail and their date ranges, but they are usually vast. They include everything from early cartographic records to annals, deeds, leases, charters, crown records, and government reports, directories, newspapers, visitor accounts, illustrations and photographs, journal articles and town histories. And an increasing number of sources are now becoming available online, particularly with the virtual treasury up and running. These are all gleaned by the author with the focus of extracting the topographical history of the built heritage of every urban settlement in question. Town sources can vary also. For example, some towns that have experienced military warfare will have more maps of the defences, while other towns have preserved their corporation minute books, which are extremely rich sources, while others, their corporation books are simply missing for various reasons. The author then assesses the existing sources for their town and will extract the topographical features and descriptions. This is then funneled into the 22 thematic sections, or the DNA of the town that we consider, and of the various functions for every town. For example, the population figures gathered from sources such as census returns, religious surveys, and early visitor accounts with town estimates are compiled in Section 8, Population. Sources such as maps, deeds, newspapers, directories that have road, street, alley or lane names will be alphabetically ordered in Section 10, Streets. And then sources that identify sites such as mills, forges, watchmakers, etc. will be put chronologically into Section 15, Manufacturing, for example. The draft then comes into the office where it is reviewed and edited and reviewed and edited and reviewed and edited and reviewed and edited, and then it's eventually published along with the thematic facsimile maps and views of the town. So that's just a sample from Dublin Part 2. So the text content. This section of the atlas comprises of a topographical essay describing the evolution of the urban settlement, or when a space becomes a place, the topographical information gazetteer, and the sources used in research. As I mentioned earlier, there are over 50,000 topographical entries or histories in the 30 Atlas publications. These are site histories that can be examined in this micro or macro history of a building, street, or in a thematic, national or international manner. First, to look at some micro history examples. Each entry follows the same structure. We are concerned with the modern name, in this case it's Home Rule Street, the location, and the history of that site. So, for example, in streets, I'm going to break this down. We have Home Rule Street in Dungarvan, so this is the lead entry here, the modern name. And we're looking at, we use GeoHive, which is the Ordnance Survey online mapping service, so we can see the modern name of Home Rule Street is here, and it's located to the east of Strandside East, southeast, that sounds complicated. But this is our thoroughfare, so it's giving you a verbal description of where it is. Then we're concerned with the history of the street, so we see that it's unnamed in 1775, which is Scala, which is the earliest reference that we have for it. It's also unnamed on Coot until we see in the Boat Estate map in 1832, it's called Cúla Tallinn. We record the name changes, so in this case we see on the valuation map it's called Victoria Lane, and we follow the history of the street right the way through to its modern street, which is Home Rule Street in circa 2019, and we'll also record the nameplates, so you probably can't see that there, but that's the nameplate for the town, and that's either generated from walking the streets or from Google Street View in this case. So street names can be useful in describing the function of the street or what it represented there. For example, Mill Street, there was a mill on the street, Schoolhouse Lane, Castle Street, Fishamble Street, where the fish market would have been. And the case of Cúla Tallinn, meaning a bend or corner or a nook, it's describing the shape of the street. Streets can also be named in honour of a landowner or developer, like Dawson Street or Gardner Street in Dublin, a monarch or a patriot. We've got Georgia Streets, O'Connell Streets, and in the case of Dungarvan, it was called Queen Victoria Street in 1851. Many Irish street names changed, particularly in the early 20th century. However, this example in Dungarvan clearly illustrates the town corporation loyalties, honouring Gladstone's promise of home rule for Ireland ahead of his first bill in 1886. That's probably the quickest name change that I've come across so far in researching. If you're a researcher looking at older sources, and in this case we'll look at some cross-references, this is the 1756 map, Roke's exact survey of Dublin. If you're not familiar with Dublin, you might come across this Sackville Street and wonder where it was. Well, if you go into section 10 streets, you'll see that Sackville Street will direct you to O'Connell Street Upper, and if you go to O'Connell Street Upper, you'll get the full history of the thoroughfare. Sometimes the historic sites are no longer extant, but we're able to use historical mapping to give their precise location on a modern map. In this case, it's an aerial view of where the Dungarvan railway station was once located. And again, this is using GeoHive. Railways have a great deal of infrastructure, which can alter the topographical landscape of a town. And if you wanted to find out more about the railway, before it was the famous Greenway down there now, you'll find details of the railway bridge and how it was depicted by Stopford in 1880, and the history of the railway line itself. So another approach to a microhistory is to look at a particular building, and why not start here? We know that the Royal Irish Academy has been in existence since 1785, but not always in this house. So what was this building before the Academy moved here in the 1850s? Well, if we go into residence in Dublin, we can find that it was estimated to be built in circa 1760 and was called Northland House, and it later became the Bishop of Derry's house in 1809. Like most Georgian townhouses, it had a stable and a coach house to the back, probably where we are right now. And we can trace the function of the building, because it changed, from residence to 21 entertainment, memorials and societies, when it was a Freemasons' Hall by 1828, and later the Irish Reform Club in the 1840s, before the Academy transferred to this house. And this house was seen as a desirable place to move to because it was freestanding and it was thought to be less susceptible to fire, so it would protect the growing collection of the antiquaries and the manuscripts. So then you might ask, where was the Academy before it came to Dawson Street? With a quick search through 20 Education, the Academy is found on Grafton Street, opposite the Trinity Provost's house. And it was granted you can see that it was granted the royal warrant in 1785 ahead of the charter in 1786, with the library being added in 1834. We can see again, this is quite an interesting history, it was located in the former navigation house. And if you wanted to find out what that was, you can go to section 17, transport, and you can see that it was originally built in 1763 and it was associated with the Grand Canal Company. Each atlas has a detailed bibliography, which you probably can't read this now, but if you want to find out more about a particular site or further urban history of that particular town, you'll find multiple publications there that will relate to it. In terms of macro histories, there are numerous ways in which the topographical information can be used to demonstrate various trends. In the first example from Dublin Part 3, the distribution of mills, metal founders and brewers, distillers and tanners are displayed on an 1843 base map. Access to water, as you can see, was important for the tanning and brewing sites, and they were often located on the outskirts of the town or the city. In this example from Belfast, the vast number of known religious buildings that existed between 1842 and 1902 were also mapped from the topographical information in a city that serviced the fastest growing population in the later 19th century. Another example of a macro history is Limerick over approximately 1,000 years. Various town walls, religious, administrative, defensive and manufacturing sites are depicted on a modern base that also show the development of the street system and land reclamation. The topographical expression of thematic sites can also help in understanding broader national events that took place. For example, could you correlate the increased access to literature to the social and political movements of the later 18th century Ireland? We can see from the vast number of printing houses in Dublin added to the increased literacy with more schools for various classes of the population and different ways of circulating material could be seen as one of the mobilising factors of insurrection. Technological movements can also be tracked through the TI with the advent of the railway, mapping communication and movement of people, goods and ideas, and this can be reflected in the changing industries appearing in towns over time. The impact of the railway can also be found topographically with the development of seaside towns and the promotion of healthy values and movement of people into cities, while also movement of people into the suburbs. They also affected industry in both positive and negative ways. Cheaper commodities, for example, from the vast factories imported from the larger cities, marked the end of many cottage industries that could no longer compete in the industrial age. And to conclude, the collaborative methodology that has evolved allows atlases to be comparable nationally and internationally using both texts and maps. It is also regularly tested in academic publications and our annual seminars. And as illustrated in this talk, the information contained within the IHTA may be used in various ways to assist in various research themes. We have a wide range of users who delve into the different aspects of the atlas, not just geographers and historians, but also archaeologists, architects, planners, librarians and archivists, digital mapping, and indeed anybody who has an interest in the sense of place. The sources used and the references will provide a platform for anybody wishing to delve further into urban studies. And I should say that this information is available through our 30 atlases, but also 28 of our atlases are available freely online, that you can, probably about 40,000 sites that you're available to download onto your phone right now. So thank you.